Okay, a little farther together here now. I went ahead and replaced the pins for the weights. The holes on the weights weren't too bad. And look how much better our play is here. The pins were a little difficult to see here. They're dished there in the middle. That causes some wear, and when that happens, when your pins and weights start to wear, what it does is puts a lot of side-to-side stress on your rollers. It'll eat up the bushings on either side, and it'll eat the roller up. And if you lose the bushing on the side, the roller will start eating into the spider, and then it's just a downhill spiral effect. I've seen the weights get as bad as to start cutting into the side of the spider. That's when things start to get dangerous. But anyway, the rollers were good, and the bushings are good, so I'm not going to mess with that, even though I've got some new counterfeit communist Taiwan parts here on the bench, courtesy of eBay. And I went ahead and used the buttons that they sent me, which I don't know how well these are going to work. This is kind of a test run with this stuff. One thing I like about these buttons is they're so tight I about had to drive them in with a hammer, but at least maybe I won't get a bunch of dirt behind them like I did with the Polaris ones. The Polaris ones fit a little bit loose, and that causes belt dust and debris to get behind the buttons and causes this whole cycle to happen. So it'll be interesting to see if these wear decently. I don't know if they will. Time will tell here. So I did get the bearing greased back in the correct way, and just so you guys know, I forgot which way the bearing was supposed to roll when I took it out to grease it. And after doing some looking at it, it needs to turn clockwise when you're looking at the front of the clutch. It won't turn counterclockwise. So just for you guys that have EBS clutches. Okay, stick the spider back on. I cleaned that bushing up. And let's find our mark here, our white mark. There it is. And white mark on the spider. And before I get too carried away, there is some grooving here on the sides, which you're going to have, especially on the one side, the side that all the power is transferred to. And generally those are the buttons that are going to be worn as well. What I like to do when I'm going back together, especially with some new buttons where it might be a little sticky for a little while till they break in, I like to use a graphite lubricant like this. Sprays on wet, it dries about 30 seconds, and it's just really slippery to the touch and really strong. It's graphite, and it'll give you a nice slick surface to go back together with, and it'll last a while. So since my buttons are already in here, I can go ahead and start spinning this down. With Polaris buttons, you're going to have to guide it down so all the buttons don't fall out as it threads down. It's raining here today. Kind of odd for this climate. We get about 11 inches of rain a year, so it's kind of a interesting sight when it starts to precipitate. Just checking here to see how sticky it is. A little bit, but not bad. New buttons and new bushings, they kind of take a little bit to break in, especially with these, or like I say, these buttons are less than perfect. But the price was right, so we'll see if the risk is worth the reward here. Okay, so the spider's down. Now we need to tighten it up. And like I've told you before, the torque spec on the spider, somewhere around 200 foot-pounds. I don't get that technical, I just tighten it up tight. That's pretty tight. Now as clutches wear, you start to get grooves into the side of your sheave here. There are shims, like in this kit, these little aluminum shims, not much thicker than a sheet of tin foil. I suppose you could shim them. I never try to get that technical with it. I just make sure there's not a lot of slop. Because I think no matter what you do with a worn clutch, inevitably they're going to run a limited amount of time. Maybe 800 to 1,000 hours is what you can reasonably expect. And after that, you're going to have so much wear here, it's going to be about impossible to keep the buttons in. Okay, so here's our white mark. Spring is on. I took the liberty of cleaning that bushing out. Keep an eye on that bushing when you take these down, as well as the one in here on the sheave. They like to ride out. They can ride out through the bottom. And when that happens, you're going to start having trouble with the clutch. You can Loctite those bushings back in, but actually getting them to stay there generally doesn't happen. I have peened them in to tighten them up, and that works for a while, but you're just looking at a new clutch is what you're looking at in time when the bushings start to fall out. Main reason is not because Loctite doesn't work, but because clutches are so hot, it melts the Loctite, and the Loctite just ceases to help after it melts, you know. So especially if you're working your Ranger hard, the Loctite option is just not going to be a good one for you. So I'm going to go ahead and tighten this up, and we're going to be done. I'm going to go ahead and line my white line up. Now, understand there's spring tension here, so you're going to want to tighten this down evenly. It's pretty easy to do. Just like anything, if you use a little bit of common sense, it goes a long ways. You can improvise for a lot of special tooling with just some common sense and some basic skills. And don't be afraid to go beyond your comfort level. That's the way people learn. And none of us would be able to do things, get to where we are today without having someone stepped outside their comfort zone and tried something for the first time. This is something you can do if you can build some tooling and give it a try. Clutch has got good movement there, working nice and free. For me, I like to ride on top of the clutch at what hours it was rebuilt or installed new. That way I can keep a log. And best to go ahead and put a note somewhere else on the machine, in the logbook or under the hood, someplace where you're going to see it, so that you can remember to tear this down again before things get too hairy. Usually by the time you start noticing performance issues, a lot of times it can be too late. And like I say with these aftermarket parts, it may not be the best decision I've made in terms of quality. I just don't know. Sometimes things surprise you. And with the prices of parts, with buttons costing $11 a piece, rollers I think are, I don't know, $15, $20, I'm not sure. A Polaris belt, $170. It makes you start thinking, what can I do to save some money and still have a realistic, lifespan out of this component? And just the way things are in our environment today, where anything made in the United States costs 3 times as much as something built in China, has caused us to start looking, basically overseas for parts. And I hate to say it, and maybe it's un-American of me, but I'd rather help that 6-year-old kid that's trying to work his butt off all day to feed his family than pay for somebody that's whining about their union benefits working 30 hours a week. So my sympathy level is just that low. But thanks for watching. Hopefully this was of some help to you guys. Sorry about the political rant there. But if you have questions, shoot me a line. Thanks.